All right. This morning, as I said, I'm going to touch a little bit on something that Brother Bill emphasized. At least it's going to be a part of what I share this morning. Something that Brother Bill emphasized this morning is that there's a battle for the mind, and I'm in agreement. Although I'm going to look at it from a slightly different perspective. Now, I don't want us to be bored. I don't want us to be distracted. And I might just proceed this morning in a way that I engage you a bit more so that you are a part of our study. But the first thing I want to ask, I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about there is a legal reason. I don't know the title. I'll give it a title afterwards. But I want to talk about some of the hard questions that people have. We all know that we're living in a dangerous time. Some of the hardest questions that people ask are questions like, you had an earthquake in, was it Syria, Turkey? Hundreds of thousands of people died, including little babies. I saw a picture of a man sitting down, holding the hand of a little girl. She's buried under the rubble. It's his daughter. And he has sat there for, I think, about 16 hours and he won't move. He's holding her hand. She's dead. He's alive. And I put myself in that position and I wonder, my God, if that is my daughter, I'll probably do the same thing. She dies holding my hand. How do I get up and leave her? How do I let go? Where is God? Because it happens to babies. And injustice takes place. You hear of innocent people being sent to the electric chair, people being accused of rape or murder who were not guilty. You hear of the wicked being set free. All kinds of lunacy. Where is God? And the unbeliever and the atheist will say, God is a mirage. It's a figment of your imagination. If there's a God, these things wouldn't happen. As I've said before, sometimes I myself have the thought, I think of these brutal, mindless murderers. I wish I were an angel. I had the power. Every time somebody goes to kick off somebody's door, I'd be waiting as soon as the door opens. If I had the power, I'd wait for some of these murderers to come with their guns and I'd be there waiting. Where is God? And where are the angels? And that is why some people really question whether there's a God. Of course, the alternative is equally mystifying. If there's no God, why am I here? Where did I come from? Did I create myself? Did things just appear? You know that reality tells you that there is a God. And reality also seems to say, if there's a God, he just doesn't care. I believe there's only one possible way to explain it. One possible way. I'm going to share it with you today, and if you can think of another way, I want to hear it. If you can think of another way, another reason, I believe that there's only one way to understand. And when you understand, your heart can be at rest. I think it explains almost every problem that a Christian might have, or that the world might have concerning God. Now, first of all, let me ask you to do something for me. I'd like to know, can you suggest, anybody, what kinds of government do we have? What kind of governments are there? Democratic, all right. You have democratic as one. Somebody got on my wavelength. Any other? Autocratic, right. What other name might we give to that? What other name might you give to an autocratic government? Not laissez-faire, absolutely not. That would be the opposite. I think people would refer to an autocratic government as maybe a dictatorship. Would you agree? Yes. A dictatorship. All right. So I'll leave it at autocratic. Is there any other kind? Republic. I'm going to put republic, although to be honest, I don't have a clear idea of what the difference is with a republic. I think it might be a little different. It might not fit. Republic, I'll put it there anyway.
Dictatorship and theocratic.
Theocratic, all right. We said dictatorship is the same as autocratic. So I'm going to put theocratic. I think these cover the bases. Most of the governments that we would talk about would fall under democratic or autocratic, okay? Republic, I think it has to do with more the form or the structure of the government and not so much with whether it is autocratic or democratic. It's like a subcategory or like it's an umbrella that could cover both of these. So I'm going to leave it at these two basically. Now, what's the difference between a democratic government and an autocratic government? Anybody? Sister Sanya says the people have a say. And in autocratic, one person makes all the decisions. Am I right? Basically.
A few, maybe not specifically one, but a few.
Yeah, one or a few. But generally, you always have one person who is identified as the dictator. But I agree, Brother Bill. Right. It's a few control, a few decide. A few or one decide, make all the decisions. Okay? Now, as we all know, the word democratic, demo has to do with the people. I think it's from a Latin word. I'm not sure what the word is, but it has to do with people. So you hear a lot of talk about democracy and the democratic form of government because people believe it is the best form of government because people make the decision. Practically, it often doesn't work that way. But when you find that the government begins to ignore or bypass the people, there are usually grumblings and rumblings. And if possible, people will try to get rid of that government. So governments that appeal to people try to appeal on the basis of we're a government of the people, for the people. This kind of government, autocratic, they rule by force all the time. Communism is an example. And people are afraid that socialism goes in that direction too. People are afraid of that, whether it is so or not. But it's something people are scared of because I suppose it's always a fearsome thing. But in the church, or the group, or the youth club, or the government, when one person decides for everybody, then the rest of you become puppets. Then it's like everybody else doesn't have any sense. And one person just takes over. So people are usually very unhappy under an autocratic government, and they tend to prefer democracy. Now, what about a theocratic government? Which one of these is a theocratic government? Is it democratic or is it autocratic?
Autocratic would be near about.
All right, I think most of the world will agree with Sister Heather. I think most of the world will agree with Sister Heather. And I'm going to say that this is one of the reasons why there are so many questions about God, because most people believe that God's government is autocratic. It's like a dictatorship. And if this is true, then God is to be blamed for all the problems. I really believe that when you understand properly, God's government is based on democracy. It's not based on autocracy. It's not based on a dictatorship. Now, let me try to justify what I say. And I know I wanted to challenge you with that thought because, to be honest, it's a thought that never occurs. I see your brother Vin. It's a thought that never occurs to people. You just kind of assume certain things. And those assumptions, they affect every conclusion that we have down the line till it comes down to our personal relationship with God and how we look at life. Now that we have come to the back end, Satan is beginning to demonstrate that his system can only work under autocracy. That's what he's beginning to demonstrate. But Satan never presented his case to the angels as autocratic because nobody wanted one mind controlling all of them. What Satan claimed was that God is autocratic. And he claimed we need to be democratic. Right? Because under the surface, They never recognized the democratic principles of God's government. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to explain that for us, right? Now, there are two principles that I believe are the foundation of God's government. I'm taking us point by point because I want to make sure that we're following what I'm trying to say. All right? So I'm asking questions. What would we say? Now, not the system of government. But I've claimed that God's government must be democratic because if it is autocratic, it won't be fair, and it takes away two things that I believe are the principle of every good government, and particularly God's government. Somebody give me an idea of what those two principles are.
Free will.
Free will. Thank you, Sister Heather. She's sharp this morning. Free will. Anything else? Happiness. I'm going to put that into Jordan. Happiness on the part of his people, and happiness is almost certainly conditional on free will. If you're not free, you're not going to be happy. But there's something else on God's part that is also necessary. Justice. I'm going to put that into, although I didn't have it on my list of two, but I agree. And one other thing. Fair play, which is kind of like under justice, but I'm going to put love. Maybe love is too much of a general word. Maybe that's why nobody suggested love. But I believe that these are the specifications, or the ingredients of a perfect system of government. All you can do, to see if I'm making sense, just think of your family. Right? Everybody here who is a father or mother. Just think of your family, because in everybody's family you endeavor to have a perfect system of government. Everybody, right? Free will. You want it to be there, even though when a child is small, you might have to override it at times, based on lack of understanding. But that's what you want. When my child does what I want to do, because he freely does it, it's the greatest pleasure to me as a parent, whether it's a child or a grandparent. When you have to be constantly using a little bit of force or compulsion, is not the happiest thing. But when your child will come voluntarily because they believe in what you are doing and choose that way, nothing makes a parent more happy. You who are still children, you know how to make your parents happy. That is the happiest thing for a parent, because they want free will combined with cooperation, combined with obedience. Happiness, of course. Who doesn't want happiness in his family? Anybody in my family is unhappy, I have a hard time sleeping. Well, I don't have a hard time sleeping, but I go to bed. I go to bed with a heavy heart. Anybody in my family. Just think of your family and you know that what I'm saying is true. You are the governor. You are the person in charge. You are the person responsible. You want happiness. Justice. Absolutely. I am so concerned that, I'm always making things for kid, right? Because he's the one who is always around me. So the other day I was making something for Zane. Trying to make it, I haven't finished it. And I'm spending a lot of time, and he comes and asks me, how come you're spending so much time on this? So I had to say, you know how many hours I spent making things for you? I had to ask him how many things I made for him, because I want to make sure that he understands that I'm not unfair. Right? I want to make sure that any little seed of thought that may be in his mind about unfairness, I want to dispel it, because I want to be fair. So that is important to me. And you can always see it's important to the people who are citizens in your kingdom. It's important to them to know that you are fair. So, and love, of course. I don't need to comment on love. Love is the overriding principle that suffuses and envelops every principle in your family. So maybe I don't even need to say this. So God's government is founded upon these principles. Right? And you can tell from looking at these principles that it cannot be a dictatorship. It cannot be an autocratic government. The number one is instantly eliminated if you have autocracy. Where you have dictatorship, number one is instantly eliminated. When you have one person making their decision for you, you're not free. You have to do what you are told to do because somebody else tells you to do it. And when you're a child, sometimes it shapes on you as you begin to become a teenager and your parent is continually telling you what to do because you are beginning to feel that need to make your own decisions. It becomes disturbing for you, sometimes causes a little friction. But it illustrates what I'm trying to say. Now, these are the fundamental things I would like us to bear in mind as we proceed with what we are sharing today. Now, I'm going to use another word that I want to define carefully. I'm going to use another word. So I'm going to clean off what I have on the board. Hopefully these things stick in our mind. And I'm going to go to another word that I'm going to use that I want us to understand. And the word I want to use is the word legal. Let me explain what I understand this word to mean in the context of this discussion. I'm going to talk about legality in the context of God. I'm going to suggest to you that God is bound by legal rules. Not so with a dictator, not so with an autocratic person. When I am the autocrat in my home, no rule can stop me. My wife can't stop me and my children can't stop me if I am an autocrat. My voice is king. My decisions are the ones that are carried out regardless of what anybody else might want to think. That is autocracy. And I'm suggesting to you that God, if he is really not involved in autocracy, he is involved in democracy. There have to be rules that govern God. If this is a new concept to us, again I say, it's because of the cliche, the well-established idea that God is sovereign and he does anything he wants. If he wants to send a blast of lightning, if he wants to send a flood, if he wants to send an earthquake, he does what he pleases and nobody can stop him. Because after all, he's God. And all you can do is be a subject and swallow it down. So everything that goes wrong, you blame God. And if it goes right, well, you blame him too, or you credit him too. But that's the idea people have. God is a great manipulator, a great dictator, an autocrat, who is just pulling the strings and everybody is dancing to his tune. And he's in some kind of strange game where he alone knows the rules, he alone knows what is going on, and he's only interested in what he wants. Nobody else matters. We are pawns and puppets in a great cosmic game. That's a concept most people have of God. But if you look at what I shared before, you understand that this cannot be. So I'm going to use the word legal, and I'm going to say that there are legal rules that bind God. Now, when I talk about rules, what do I mean? I mean restraining limitations. That's what I mean by legal. All right? Actually, you can't drive over 50 kilometers per hour in a built-up area. That's a restraining kilometers. When you get your license, if you do that, if you drive over 50, is it 50? Yeah, the police can come and give you a ticket. Don't enter another person's house unless you get permission. Don't break down the door. If you do that, the police will come and arrest you and they'll have justification because you have broken the restraining limitations. The rule says don't do it. There's a rule that governs all of us. If you break the rule, you are illegal. So legal means, by the word legal, I mean restraining limitations. And I'm suggesting to you that there are some of these that govern God. Has to be if God is in a democracy. If you're in a democracy, you cannot do as you please. How can God Almighty be limited? How can anybody tell God what to do? How can anybody say to God, you can't? Because of the principle that I wrote on the board. Because of the principle of what is love and free will. You can't set somebody free and still dictate to the person. You can't. You can't say you are free, but you have to do what I think you should do. You can't. Now, if you make people free, and you still are going to rule them, what must be the basis of your government? My question may be not so clear. If you set people free, but you would like them to do what you want them to do, on what basis are they going to do what you want them to do? Because they love you and they trust you. You must build a basis for love and trust. You must build a basis for love and trust. And if you don't have that basis, you cannot have a free government that is based on democracy. That's why these politicians come around and say, we're going to build roads. We're going to do this for you. We're going to do that for you. They're trying to build your confidence. And they're trying to demonstrate that they love you and care for you. And so even though you know it's a lie, you are so gullible that you run out and you start campaigning for them and you go and vote for them. But they understand the principle. They understand the principle that when you have a democracy, it must be based on free will. And so because it's free will, you have to gain the love and the trust of people. Otherwise, you better make a dictatorship because it's the only way you're going to make any progress. You better make a dictatorship. You're going to put them under the yoke and under the rod and demand that they do what you want them to do. If it's going to be free will, you must gain their confidence and you must gain their love and you must do it fairly. When I say fairly, what do I mean? I'm going to use a little bit of our downhill politics to help us to understand a little bit. Look here. When the party in power spend government money to advertise their party, when they give out government contracts to win votes, it's a problem, isn't it? The Electoral Commission or whoever is in charge will make us think about it and they can even be taken to court and charged for certain things, right? Or theoretically that is possible. Because everybody realizes that in a democracy, the free will of the people must be based upon a balanced information without advantage to one side or another. There must be fair play without unfair advantage. Because that's the way a democracy is. People must be free to make up their minds without unfair advantage. If my reasoning is not making sense, please stop me and tell me where I'm not making sense, because I'm talking about God Almighty and God's democracy. Maybe I should even title this presentation God's Democracy.
But then look at the other side. God have to give us reason to love him.
Absolutely, Brother Bill.
The politician have to give us reason to vote for him.
Exactly.
So vote out enough to work.
Right. But it's not unfair advantage.
No.
Right. So the same opportunity he gives us, you have to give the opponent the same opportunity. So when you were talking this morning about them parading Satan in Rio, in Brazil, and where they're setting up this scarf in London, Satan has to have his fair play too. He has to have his opening because, as you said this morning, it is a battle for the mind. Now, this is what it is. The politicians battle for your mind. They want your trust and they want your love. And so they battle for your mind by giving you what? What do they give you? Promises. They give you information. Some of it is false information. But the position that you take is based on the information that you are given. And sometimes it's a lot of false information, but people buy it, right? In the same way, I'm asking you to follow me and see if I'm barking up the wrong tree. Please tell me, because I'm talking about the greatest government that has ever existed, God's government. And I'm trying to say it is based on certain principles. And I think if you understand those principles, you are going to begin to have answers to those hard questions. So, God is legally restrained. And when I say legal, I mean, for some reason, there's restraint. And that restraint is based upon God's nature of love and fair play. God's nature is a legal impediment to dictatorship. God's nature. We trust that God is a God of love, and we trust that God is fair. Daniel said justice and fair play. God is that kind of person, and because God is this kind of person, I can depend on it that God will be fair. So God is bound and is limited by his own nature. I heard it said that George Washington or one of them said that I cannot lie. I don't know. I don't think that was true. But he said it. But when somebody says I cannot lie, it means that my nature is against it, right? There's one thing I like to talk about. I don't want to dwell on it, but I say I could never be that. Okay. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. But because it is abhorrent to my nature, hateful to my nature, I could not do that. God is love, and it is not what he It's not an attribute that he possesses. It is what he is. God is fair and God is just. These are not qualities that he borrowed. They are elements of his nature. And why God will not rule. Let me say something a little brazenly, but I'm going to be dogmatic about it anyway. I'm going to say that God is unwilling to rule in a universe where he's not wanted. Would you agree with that? Now, dictators don't care because dictators are after power. But when you already have all power, when you already are almighty and you created everything, what can somebody bribe you with? What can somebody bribe you with? You don't need anything from anybody. The only thing that limits God is God's nature of love and fair play. And these are strong limitations that I can put my pot on fire when I consider them. God cares for us and God cares that we should be free. That is why God will govern the universe based on democracy and free will and not dictatorship. And if God is going to govern by free will, God has to restrain himself. Because the moment God begins to put his power on display, and the moment God begins to use his greater abilities to overthrow Satan's arguments, that instant he's taking away free will. Can you see what I'm saying? You have 10 children, you have 5 children, you have 3 children. One of them argues and says, that is not fair. And you get a big stick and give him a proper thrashing. You think there are 2 going to ever open their mouth? Only when they turn man and can beat you. Right?
But if the Satan tried with Jesus now.
But not force, Sister Dar. I don't think it was force.
So in that context, why this?
I'm coming back to the question, but let Brother Bill speak.
So in that context, why this God? Word.
It's a good question. All right, let me answer Sister Doreen and then I come to you. All right. This is why I'm persuaded. You know, in most pictures you see Satan and his angels with swords fighting in heaven. As a matter of fact, one dear sister of mine said, Satan determined that he was going to use force against force up in heaven. Don't know if any of you ever read it. You might know which dear sister I'm mentioning. So Satan determined that he was going to use force against God in heaven. Tell me if Satan had lost his mind to attempt something so stupid. Not a thing. What Satan used was a war of ideas. It was an ideological battle. If I may use the common situation that we have before us. Mark Golding decided to spread propaganda against Andrew Holness. Andrew Holness spread propaganda against Mark Golding, and the PNP and the JLP throw slander against each other. They pick up on every little thing that the other one said because they realize they are fighting for the minds of people. So they use propaganda, right? They're not going to go out with guns and so on to compel people to come and vote for them. They are interested in deceiving your mind, buying your mind, convincing your mind, and so they use propaganda to get foolish people to put their trust in them. When you are involved in a democracy, it's an ideological battle. It's a battle of information. It's a battle of ideas. When Satan set out to fight against God in heaven, if it was a fist-to-fist conflict or a weapon-to-weapon conflict, how long do you think he would have lasted? One angel of God and all the forces of Satan have to back off. One angel. There's no hope for Satan if he attempts to fight God or fight against the forces of God, strength to strength. It's an ideological battle. The only battle where you can hope to make progress is to spread lies about God. So in heaven, what Satan did was spread dissent among the angels. He told lies on God. He lied on God. He had a weapon that God couldn't use, the weapon of lies. God can't use lies. He had it at his disposal. He spread propaganda. He spread innuendo, criticism, slander, underhand, until it broke out into the open, because his principle was to destroy confidence in God. That was the only way he could hope to set up an alternative government. So, I'm going to say something to you. When we're talking about free will, when we're talking about the principles of the government, let me explain something else. What is God and Satan fighting for then? I'm going to put it to you in another way. It's a battle for the mind. You know what they're fighting for? They're fighting for public opinion. All right? They're battling for public opinion. Now, I'm not being disrespectful to God, but honestly, public opinion means your ideas and my ideas, your perspective and my God wants to put before the universe and to get their opinion that his government is the best way. That is what God is after. He's fighting. All that he's doing in the universe is to convince the universe that his way is the best way. He's after public opinion. Why public opinion? Because he will rule in a public universe at the will and the cooperation of the people of the universe. Therefore, to do it, since he's a God who believes in free will, he must do it based on their public opinion. This is the whole point. To think that to think it is as simple as God is almighty and that's the end of the story is simplistic. Now, Brother Bill says, why did God then destroy the world by a flood in Noah's day? And I'm going to suggest something that I'm not sure about, okay? But it's a hard question. But I'm going to make a suggestion. If everything is based on free will, when would God stop it? Give me your idea, Sister Heather.
I was thinking that based on the rate that which they were going, you might destroy themselves and it wouldn't play out completely for.
All right, maybe. Let me put in something else. I'm going to tell you when God would probably step in. If it reaches a place where free will is being taken away, I think God would put a stop to it. Because then the whole contest becomes null and void. If free will is the basis of the government of the universe, and if free will is being taken away, it's time to stop it. I'm speculating. I'm speculating that in the time of Noah, they were getting to that place, maybe similar to where they are getting today, where they were threatening to remove people's ability to be free. And if you take that away, then the only thing that is left is force. And remember, the controversy is not about force, it's about freedom of choice. It has to be freedom of choice because the whole thing is about two governments contending for the minds of people. And when I say the mind, I mean the choices of people. It's about who chooses God versus who chooses Satan. When that is taken away from people, whether by drugs or by DNA or whatever means, it's time to stop it because then the experiment is null and void. Nobody has any chance anymore when force takes over. So I believe that probably might have been what happened in the days of Noah's flood, even without the evidence to back it up. But understanding that in our days, we are reapproaching the status of the people in the days of Noah. I think it is very feasible. Okay? This is my opinion, and I don't have any proof, but it's an opinion, since you asked for it, brother Bill.
What you're saying there, why God allows these things to happen, and it to some people, it would seem that God already says. It's God is a God of humility, and human being, both the fallen world and the unfallen world do not understand God's humility. And the reason why God allows these things to happen is because he wants his creation to understand who he is. And although they were perfect, and they were fallen and Adam and Eve, they did not understand who God is. Even Lucifer did not understand. And so, because of lack of understanding, God knows the reason why he allowed this, because he knows they do not understand. They are ignorant of him.
Absolutely, Sister Howard. I agree with you that there were elements of ignorance. They knew a lot about God. They didn't know enough. Because if they had known enough about God, Lucifer could not have deceived so many of them. So you can see even from that it was an ideological conflict. When you deceive people, what it means. You have fed them lies. You have fed them lies and they have believed. It's ideology. And what God has to do is disprove the lies in a fair way. The best way to disprove the lies is to allow things to play out following very strict rules. Some time ago I said this and I'm going to repeat it. I understand now why God is not using great miracles to display his power. Because if he did, it would take away free choice. Because look here. If a man tell me to vote for him and I say no, and the man blasts a tree to ashes in my eyes, I'm going to vote for him. Whether through fear or through bribery, I'm going to vote for him. The display of power on the part of God would remove that freedom of choice based on intelligent understanding of the issues. And furthermore, as you, Ashley, I'm coming to you. And furthermore, if God is doing it, he needs to allow Satan to do it. To be fair, the same power that God puts on display, he needs to allow Satan to use the same advantage because it has to be a fair context. The Electoral Commission will agree to that. Yes, Ashley?
Aren't some of the rules basically like expedient? Because if God was able to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and flood the whole world, can't Satan do something if he wants?
That's a very good question. Okay. If Satan is overriding the rules, God has a right to step in. If God is overriding the rules, then Satan will have a right to say, I am free to do the same thing. But the thing is God taking away people's freedom of choice? But that's why I suggested that Satan in the flood was taking away people's freedom to choose. That's why God, okay, let me be specific and break it down. I might cut out this part out of the video because I don't want YouTube to take it down. I've done that to several of my videos. But if, for example, they're really attempting to take DNA, to manipulate people's power to choose, to turn you into a kind of robot, if Satan has the power to do it, so they have the power to create human beings who really have no power of choice, then there's really no choice. You don't have a choice. You're not born. You have no way. You can't look at information and choose God. If man develops this ability, it's time to wipe out the race. It's time to put a stop to it. If this is happening, if a world has come to this place, it's time to put a stop to it. So God has a right to do this because it means that they have removed the basis of free government.
So Satan went over the boundaries of the rules that were made.
That is what I'm suggesting. Yes. And another thing I want to say is that before Jesus came, in a sense, things were different. And let me explain before Brother Bill speaks. Under the Old Covenant, God set up a system based on Satan's principles. Some Christians will say I blaspheme. But let me explain what I mean. What is Satan's principle? Let me tell you what Satan's principle is. It is government from the outside. Whenever you govern a person from the outside, you know what you better do? You better make rules and you better make penalty. You better beat them when they go wrong. Because government from the outside never reaches the mind. You will always have disobedience. You will always have rebellion when you try to govern from the outside. That's why I break the speed limit. That's why no matter how they make rules, people continue to kill each other because it's government from the outside. God's government is the only government in the universe that is government on the inside. Now, before that happened, before Jesus came, Jesus brought that government, the new covenant. But before that happened, how could God control people? How could God get people to put in a system where he could govern them and help them to develop in a certain way? He had to set up the principle of outside government. So he gave them commandments and he gave them rules and he gave them strict guidelines. And if you didn't do it, you would die or you'd be beaten or something would happen to you. You had to obey the rules, whether you wanted to or not. It was dictatorship.
So the Old Testament was dictatorship.
The Old Testament was dictatorship. It was autocratic. But it was a teaching tool. It was not God's true system of government. The true government arrived when Jesus arrived. But until that time, God operated on the principles of Satan's government. I'm going to put it that way. But even though it was Satan's government, I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm just saying it's government on the outside. It's necessary for criminals. It's necessary for children. It's necessary for people who are not born again.
But it was good for them.
It was the only way.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not denying that. But I'm still saying it's not God's system because God's system is greater. But God submitted and did that for a while because of the circumstances. So, I just want to say to all of us that it is clear that this battle is not over. How do I know? Because Satan is still alive. Satan is still alive. Evil is still in the world. Evil is still in the universe. Why is it permitted? Because the demonstration is not over. The ideological battle still remains. False information is still bending people's minds, and we are responsible for giving them the true information. That is why the gospel of the kingdom must be preached in all the world for a witness to all nations, that people have a chance to make free choice. People will serve God because they're determined to serve God. And they will serve Satan because they're determined to serve Satan. It's a battle for the mind. And Satan would love to destroy that freedom to think. But based on the principles of the controversy, God can't allow that. It has to be. God must fight, but he must fight fairly. Limited use of force. He must allow Satan the room to carry out his campaign as well. That is why we see what is going on in the world. To be honest, when I began to understand this more clearly, all the hard questions were answered. I understood everything. I understand why even as a Christian, God has to allow, sometimes he doesn't answer my prayer. I understand why he allows evil to come into, well, let me put it another way. I said, Brother Bill looking quizzical. He doesn't answer my prayer in the way I expect. Let me put it that way. Evil is allowed and God doesn't intervene. Because sometimes God has to demonstrate that our faithfulness to him is not based upon the benefits we are getting, but upon the fact that we see that his system of government is the best. This is what pleases God. This is what speaks for God's government. When a person stands up and says, if you kill me, I'm still going to serve God, you shut Satan's mouth. When a person says, I suffer and I don't see my prayers answered, but God's way is still the best way. I've looked at both governments, and God's government is what I see as the only way that we can be happy. It's the way I see as a better way. This speaks for God's government. And God will have a people upon this earth who stand up and say, no matter what the world will do, no matter what the final demonstration of Satan's power can display on this planet, even if all our resources are taken away, our lives are jeopardized, we will stand for God's kingdom because we have seen, we have proven, we have known that it is the best way. This is what will speak for the kingdom of God. And finally allow God to say, well then now, the time has come to destroy Satan and everything that belongs to him, because public opinion rejects his government. Everybody in the universe can see, the angels who had questions in your mind, everybody can see that this system of government that Satan was promoting is really a recipe for disaster. They're going to see that it leads to dictatorship and control of people and control of people's minds. Satan's perfect government is yet to be seen. It's going to appear when the mark of the beast comes. We are going to see that the only way you can control people outside of internal government, it leads to a place where step by step, degree by degree, it comes to the place where the only resort is an iron hand of dictatorship. You can't get anywhere else. More and more, the cards are drawn tighter and tighter because what? You're trying to control people. The minds of a few men, led by Satan, takes control of everybody and wants to bend you to their will, and you are not willing. So what do? They have to put government in place. They have to put police in place, soldiers in place. To do what? To compel you to conform to what they believe to be the best way. That is the ultimate of Satan's system of government. And the universe will see that from the beginning, God's way of freedom, based on love and free choice, is the only way for a perfect universe. Based on God and his Son governing within, true righteousness by faith. That is the answer. Those who know the truth, they will embrace this government even in the midst of the greatest negativity and the hardest trial that this planet has ever seen. They will still embrace God's way. And so, what I really wanted to say, I hope you have understood what I've been trying to say, is that when you understand the legal background, understanding the word legal, meaning the restraining limitations on God, then you can understand all those hard questions. Then you can understand why my decisions and how I stand is so important to the establishing of the kingdom of God.
But I brought a picture of it, and when you see, God gives Satan the ultimate power, freedom, but free choice to do whatever I want. How you see God stand by and see Satan exercise those powers, and he is destroyed the ignorant and the helpless. So where's mercy?
I agree with you. It's a terrible reality. But I think about it all the while, and I realize that it is because you have to endure something for the ultimate good. The ultimate good is the end of the story. Along the way, when you fight a war, I mean, wars in the human sphere are so unjust, but you take little boys who never, almost fresh off the mother's breast, and you send them to the battlefront, and they die there. Millions of people die who never started the war, but they fight for the cause. And if they believe in it, they go willingly. Sometimes you have to draft them and force them to go. But it's a similar situation where God never wanted one person to die. But when the conflict came up, it was inevitable that many are going to die. He just has to send the information out there and send the lifeboat out there and say, I'd like you to get into the lifeboat. He gives the information. And who gets the information get in. And some don't and most do. But it's based upon their response to God's effort to save. There's nothing else. Because if he does otherwise, he's being unfair.
So then the one who never get information otherwise, finally going to come back with judgment, we burn it together and live there.
The unlucky one who never got information. There are going to be very few of those. And that's why there are going to be very few of those. And that's why I agree that if there are any such, they are going to remain as though they never existed. That's why I have taken that position and still believe it. As though they never existed.
I don't believe that.
Okay, that's fine to start because it's speculation. It's my opinion. And it's your opinion, right? But I believe that everything that God does is based on fair play. And I don't think it's fair to call up a person and judge him when he never had a chance. To me, that is not fair play or justice. And I believe that justice lies at the foundation of everything God does.
Maybe someone believe that that person will be saved by Jesus.
Yeah, but I understand salvation to mean to be born again. And that says different. But the thing is, those arguments can continue forever because the first thing you say is, I didn't ask to be born on this planet. I'm a victim. I didn't ask my great foreparent to listen to Satan. I am a victim.
It's going to perish.
Yeah, every person born on this planet is a victim. Every person who is ever lost is a victim. But some are going to be lost anyway. And it gives you an idea about the nature of what is going on. It's not like God could save everybody. No, I don't believe that.
It's about choice.
It's about choice, but to make a choice, you have to be informed. And there's information in the Bible that says, how can they hear without a preacher? The Bible Paul kind of had the same kind of conflict, and he asked the same questions. How can they hear without a preacher? And, there's a suggestion when Peter says God is not willing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. And where Jesus says, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, he that believeth not shall be damned. So there's an idea that God does everything possible through you and me to send the information out there. And he's praying that we carry out the job, that people might get an opportunity. So it's a hard question, but I think, again, the best way to understand it is to understand the legal background, that Satan has rights to.
Yes, not
Yes,
a
Heidi.
question for you to answer, but a question for you to think about. If you have a 2-year-old child and that child should pass away, do you think that child will be saved? You don't have to answer the question, but there's something to think
I believe yes.
Right, so the same principle, let's think about, there's something to think about.
All right, but I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you, I'm not just going to think, I'm going to respond, because I've thought about it.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to be it.
Yeah, but I'm going to explain why. A 2-year-old child is like a slate that is slightly smeared, or almost a blank slate. A grown person has developed a mind and a habit and a character that is already evil, already intransigent and set in his ways. If God is to save a person, say an adult, who has served Satan all his life, even ignorantly, in the resurrection, it will not be the same person. That person will come up with a completely different character. Nobody will know or recognize him. Because what he's known of in this world, when he comes back, going to be totally, completely different. It wouldn't be the same person. A baby is different. His character is not yet molded or made. What God has to do is give the baby the new birth, and you get back your baby, you don't even know the character of this baby because it wasn't developed. He begins to develop a character. So that is my understanding of it, and that's why I see it as different. But
I don't know if someone asked this question, but to be clear, what about who have never heard about Jesus that time?
right. The Bible lays down a principle that sometimes people never heard about Jesus, but they have come to understand that there's a God because they see the stars and they see the nature, and they come to understand that there's a God, and they develop a kind of sincere relationship with God. And it's possible for these people to come to know God on their own level, even though they never heard of Jesus. And the blood of Jesus saves them because of their faith in God, even though they never knew the details of salvation. So I believe that there are not too many of these people, because hearing the gospel gives you a greater advantage. But the Bible does open that door and says, this is possible.
Well, if you look at things from that perspective, everybody has received the information.
Exactly.
Invisible things are clearly seen by everybody from the creation, as Paul said.
And Paul says it. Paul says, but have they not heard? And he quotes from the Psalms to say, their sound is gone out into all the ends of the earth. He talks about the things of nature, and he says, everybody has heard because nature has been speaking to them. That's the point he makes. But what I'm saying is that
He has never received information.
right. So nobody is without, nobody has any excuse really, but I'm still going to say that Brother Bill might have studied nature all his life, but one day somebody comes up and tells him about the God of love and the salvation of Jesus Christ. It makes a bigger impact because now he has an intelligent understanding of the love of God and the way of salvation. So the information in Christianity gives people a far greater opportunity. I will say that. Just like an educated person who can read is better able to make decisions than a person who is ignorant and only live in the bush all his life. So, Brother Vincent and then Brother Bill.
I'm thinking about three guys in the Bible that God slew. The two sons of Aaron and this guy who was catching the ark when it was tumbling, coming from the
Uzzah.
Yeah. God killed them. What was reset for them not to do what they did? That they were killed.
Yeah, there were strong rules. God said nobody should touch the ark but the priests, and God told them that they should never offer any fire except the fire that came from the altar. These two barefaced, drunken sons go in there and light their own matches and offer strange fire before God. They disrespected God and they disrespected the holy place. Uzzah might have done it instinctively, whatever the reason. Under the system of the law, when you broke the law, you died or you were punished because you were under the system of the law, and you cannot have a law without penalties. So from the moment God put them under the law, penalties were given. Like I said, it was a system that is based on Satan's government. It was a teaching tool to teach them of something greater to come. I believe we might very well see Uzzah in the resurrection, in the new world. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what his character was. But I don't believe that everybody who died under that system is lost. Moses died under that system, and he is saved. Brother Bill.
Concerning Gideon, I'm not into a character. But you look at the thief on the cross, who is a character. And he died not somewhat in terms of transformation, like he have time to be transformed, that he can build a new character. And we all believe that he's saved. Right. So basically, I don't know if God just look at your character in order to save you.
It's a good point.
Right. So the baby, his nature is corrupt, just like your nature. And we have to never grow up to sort of demonstrate who he is. But from within, he born very corrupt. So I think that in order for God to save that little child, you have to give that child a complete new nature, a
Agreed.
born-again nature, which the thief on the cross needs just the same.
I agree. But I would say the thief on the cross obtained that nature while alive. He made a choice, and we know he didn't die that day. But even if he had died that day, I still believe that while he was alive, he committed himself to the new way of life. And God began to work that instant. When your heart is born again, I'm going to tell you, those of you who have been born again, I'll tell you this. Yesterday you used to hate somebody, and today you don't hate the person. Something changes instantly. You begin the process of change right away. If you have never been born again, you may not understand. But those who have been born again, you know that it is true. Your nature changes, and right away, your thinking and everything undergoes a transformation.